The freeze drying industry has assumed that freeze drying doesn't do much to harmful bacteria. Today, we're going to meet with an expert from Cuddon Freeze Dry who's been testing this actual assumption for the past 4 years, and he's actually completed that research here at Boreas. I'm going to meet with him today to find out what he's discovered. Lloyd is based in Milwaukee and covers North and South America for Cuddon Freeze Dry. His background is in food and agriculture engineering, not sales, which means he thinks about freeze drying equipment from a food safety and process design perspective. He's been directly involved in the validation work and is one of the most qualified people in the industry to talk about what it means. All right, Lloyd, so kill steps. I'm not really that familiar with them, but that's what we're here for. That's what you are here kind of testing. Explain what a kill step is to the layman person.
Okay, so in food processing facilities, particularly human grade, you have pathogen control a number of different ways. Some of it is through pH in the case of things like salamis and certain sausages, but in the cooked world, and I'm specifically referring to cooked products, you have things like just time and temperature. So if you have cooked chicken or cooked hamburger patties, it has to meet a certain temperature for X amount of time in order to get rid of Listeria and Salmonella, mostly. There are other pathogens of concern which affect maybe canned products like C. botulinum. I'm not specifically talking about that one. I'm talking specifically Listeria and Salmonella. So over the past 10 to 15 years, pet food has increased in quality significantly. With the Food Safety Modernization Act, a lot of pet food has gone from basically, here's the scrap from a human plant, turn it into pet food and sell it as pet food, to now it has almost the same requirements or equal requirements to what human food does. And if you think about it, it's still the same raw material, it's still the same pathogens of concern, it's the same equipment being used, just that in past years it had been ignored, and now it is something that these audits and new stores and new customers are requiring for our customers to have. You've heard in these past few years that pet food companies go through recalls where they have to say, well, there was a Listeria outbreak or there was a potential Salmonella outbreak, and then they have to recall all this product back. Companies have a really hard time recovering from a defamation of that nature, because once you have a recall of a product, it's more damaging to the brand. And you can probably correct the problem with, yes, we pinpointed exactly where we came from. It came from a contaminated batch, but people do lose a lot of trust in a brand. And if somebody's building a brand for 10 years, it could kill 10 years of momentum. So then, of course, there's the food safety aspect of it. While it may not affect animals to the same degree as it does humans, it's the handling of the product that can affect people. Children, immune-compromised people, elderly, that if they handle a product that has a pathogen concern like Listeria or Salmonella, it could be harmful and even fatal to somebody that is handling the product. So that's where the Food Safety Modernization Act kind of kicked in. The pet food industry has really stepped up its game. It's unheard of to go into a pet food facility now and not see a HACCP plan, not have a QA department. 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. Some companies probably did have that in place. A lot didn't, especially the startups. So a kill step is a process, and the one I'm specifically talking about is time and temperature enough to kill those pathogens to at least a 6 log reduction.
And what do you mean by 6 log? How many logs are there?
So 7 log reduction would be like almost complete annihilation. With a 6 log, you're talking about 99.999999% reduction of what pathogen load would be into a product. I'll get into numbers a little bit later, and I'm happy to share a study with you if you want to put that screen up as far as what our study was. So for the past 4 years, I started playing with trying to do what happens inside, not playing with a kill step yet, but what happens to those pathogens inside of the freeze drying. There's been a misconception in freeze drying saying, well, the freeze drying cycle gets so low water activity that nothing grows in it anymore. And while that's true, it's still not a kill step. Freeze drying is not a kill step, and I want to be very clear about that. It's definitely not. It's the best preservation step you could possibly get. And that being said, it'll preserve the good stuff and it'll also preserve the bad stuff. That's why in freeze drying you have probiotics being freeze dried and live cultures being freeze dried. Stuff that you want to keep alive, it becomes dormant, but it's not dead. You know, reactivate it with enough moisture and it takes off exactly where it left off. So the first step of our study in the first year was, what does traditional freeze drying do to Listeria and Salmonella? And the short answer is not much. It only gave it about a 1.5 log reduction. It reduced a little bit of activity, but not anywhere near what a governing body like USDA or FDA would consider a kill step. At best, they would call it a reduction. The second year, we did a little bit warmer time, a little bit longer time, a little bit warmer temperature, and we brought it to about 3 to 4 log reduction. Third year, same thing again, same product, same process, same amount of inoculation, and we brought it to 4 and 5 and some change log reduction on both of the pathogens. So this last year, which was just earlier this year, this is January of this year, we did a fourth validation study with data I had collected from several people I would work with. It wasn't my data to share, so we needed our own. We took internal product temperature to above 190 degrees Fahrenheit for about 3.5 hours, and that did give us a log reduction of above 6. To be perfectly honest, I was aiming for 7. It didn't get there, and there's a couple limitations there. One, you start pushing the limits of the equipment. So the equipment has, a freeze dryer is not an oven, it's a freeze dryer, so it has its limitations on how hot you want to go before you start damaging components. And second is the nature of the product itself. If it starts going past a certain temperature, especially if it's fattier, if it has a higher fat content, then the product starts looking, smelling, and acting baked even after you reconstitute it. The temperatures I used, the time and temperature I used, still allows you for most products to reconstitute with water and it goes back to its original raw state. In the study that I've had, and I've shared this with a lot of people so far, if you did a piece of chicken or a piece of beef, it looks freeze dried and it was at 192 degrees Fahrenheit internal temperature for about 3.5 hours. And then when you put that back in water, it turned back into its, pink, malleable, raw state. And everybody, organoleptically, this product is still raw. And I think the best comparison I can give to you on that, because there isn't exactly a category for it yet, is like a pasteurized egg. A pasteurized egg, if you look at a pasteurized egg, it still flows, it's still liquid, but it's not as clear as a completely raw egg. But a pasteurized egg is free of salmonella because it has gone through a kill step. So I think at some point when regulation catches up to what freeze dry should name stuff and what claims they should make, I think at some point it will get to, this is heat treated, it's pasteurized, something. I don't know what that name is going to be, but it can be done. So after 4 years of this, the short answer is a kill step is possible. You can get rid of 6+ log reduction of Salmonella and Listeria inside the freeze dryer during the freeze drying cycle, at the end of the cycle, and it happens in the absence of moisture. It's not in the presence of moisture. Those same temperatures in the presence of moisture, within 5 minutes that product's cooked. It looks different, it loses its characteristics of when it's raw, which is kind of the whole point of doing freeze drying in the first place. So we found a line where to do it. I'm not done testing. Ideally, I want to do a few more tests identical to my last one just for the sake of repeatability. And also, I want to start doing other proteins as well. I'd like to do it in poultry. I'd like to do it on, I'd like to do it maybe in egg and reconstitute egg as well, just so you can see that reconstitution you're still holding the raw properties, but you held it hot enough, long enough to be able to kill the pathogens of concern, and then you have a food-safe product.
Well, this is a big deal. I mean, you doing this research, why do it, why would Cuddon want to do this research and support you doing this? And then why share that? Because isn't this more of a kind of proprietary research? So like, Or is this more common knowledge?
It does benefit everybody, and if it benefits more people, well, great. I mean, part of people who benefit are definitely going to fall under the Cuddon branch, which is perfectly fine. I will say that some of the reasons I started looking into this was before these 4 years. Again, my background, I was in quality assurance, but then I was also in pet food processing and freeze drying, over 10 years ago. And that was always a challenge that came up. And the only real solution at the time was going HPP, which is high pressure processing. So you're sending something outside of your facility, but then you're bringing it back into the facility for, if you're doing final product, that's a good thing, and it's kind of a one and done. But if you're doing further processing to something you've gone through an HPP process, like forming, grinding, reshaping, or mixing, that's a high-risk process where you can easily introduce cross-contamination just from one employee's mistake of not washing hands, for example, or a piece of equipment being dirty, or one vegetable being contaminated and then spreading that throughout the whole process.
Put that more, though, in like simple terms. What do you mean by, so someone like grinding it more into like a sausage type of mixture where you're adding different ingredients to it? Or you're slicing it into like a thin, like deli like piece, things like that.
So yeah, there are different processes, and some companies make shapes like paws and little kibble pieces. Others will slice them into pieces like ham, like you're saying. But the thing is that you're taking a product that's already been treated and as a kill step, and every slice that you make, every regrinding that you make, there's a potential for cross contamination to get in there. And that's why grinding is one of the worst processes to introduce cross-contamination, because if it has only one little piece of contaminant, it spreads throughout the whole load of that. Again, that's why I did my study on 80-20 ground beef, because it was high enough in fat. The higher the fat is, the harder it is to kill a pathogen. It acts kind of as a insulator, if you want to call it that. And then grind, because it spreads the load through everything. Whole muscle is a little bit easier to deal with. But we like I said, this interest started more than 10 years ago, before Cuddon, and we ran into that study, like that problem. It's like, can we do a kill step? Can we get a log reduction? And there's things you can do. I mean, there's ozonated water, there's pH you can deal with, there's acid baths that you can use to, particularly on whole muscle, where you can reduce the count of something, but you're not getting to a 6 log. Nothing really matched time and temperature. The closest thing that came to it was HPP, but it's like taking a perfectly clean piece of laundry, dropping it on the floor and then picking it up again and trying to brush it off. It's not the same.
So is this a universal conclusion for any freeze dryer? Like, you're sitting behind one of your machines. Can this same conclusion be made that any freeze dryer can potentially do the 6 log reduction?
I think the best way to answer that is it can be done on ours, because ours have liquid shelves and the heat distribution is very delicate and very uniform. If another type of freeze dryer that has a different heat distribution system can deliver that same uniform heat distribution without burning the product or without having a cold spot in it, then yes, theoretically that's possible as well. I can't speak to another brand, because the study was done on our unit, liquid shelving under certain conditions. And if you were to replicate this in any facility, even if you're using our same equipment, that validation would still have to be done on site on your equipment and say, this is what I did, this is how we did it, this is the equipment we did it on, to get a sign off from and saying, yes, your process is valid.
So for your existing customers and new potential customers, this study is available within the Cuddon ecosystem, and it's a pretty big value statement.
Look, I wish I had 100 validation points to be able to share. I have 4. We've done one per year. They're expensive to do, so whenever we have the funds to do it, I get signed off on it and we're able to do it. Luckily, I have a lab here now, so I can do it firsthand. I have a third-party lab in our same building that they can do inoculating for, so that certainly helps. When I was talking about time and temperature and cooked products, there is a table from USDA, which is called Appendix A, and that has thousands of data points from meat processing plants and poultry processing plants throughout the country, and that's how that table got built. And they know that at 140 degrees, 32 minutes, you've killed up to a certain amount, and they know that at 156 degrees for 2 seconds, it's considered instant kill. Those temperatures, time and temperatures, do not apply in freeze drying because that is in the presence of moisture, and in freeze drying, it's in the absence of moisture. So it requires longer time, hotter temperatures. But at the same time, the goal is to keep the same characteristics of the original raw material. So you don't cook a product, because if not, then you're just cooking it.
Yeah.
So it was a challenge to get there, but that's what it was.
Yeah, now for the average person, okay, so you have this kill step validation,
Yep.
and it's 6 log, but what does that mean now for the freeze dryer? Are you now able to be confident where you can put in raw,
Yes.
wet proteins and meats and things like that into the freeze dryer, and you don't actually have to cook it now, you don't have to do much to it to kill those pathogens because the freeze dryer now is going to do it?
So from a food safety standpoint, yes, you are correct. I mean, if you're going to consume this as a human, I mean, I don't think you're going to eat raw chicken, no, but you're still going to cook that. But you have eliminated the pathogen possibility in that product. So you have created a greater than 6 log. Usually USDA is looking for at least 5. So again, I was shooting for 7, didn't quite get to that because of limitations on equipment and what happens to the product, but 6 is good. Considering that before trying to do this, the best log reduction, with exception of HPP, because HPP can get 5 and higher, anything else that you tried in a plant was only 1 to 2 log reduction, 3 at best, and that's still not considered a kill step. 5 and above is, and 6, let's put it, it's a happy place to be. I wish I would have gotten to 7. I wish there was more buffer in there to get to that, to say black and white, completely dead, but you're talking about 99.99999 reduction. Also, the pathogens I used were actual Listeria and Salmonella. I did not use a surrogate because some surrogates have different resistance, and I wanted to see what the actual resistance to the time and temperature was, because the concern is the actual pathogen, not the surrogate. Sometimes surrogates are given, they have a higher resistance, but it doesn't give you a true value, and I didn't want equivalent, I wanted actual. So that's why I went with the actual pathogen. Surrogate? So a surrogate is an organism that dies in similar conditions and it reacts similar to the pathogen you're trying to test, but it might die at a hotter temperature and it might have more resistance. So in the human side of food processing, no one in their right mind is going to bring a pathogen into their facility, saying they're not going to bring Listeria into facility to test. They will test a surrogate that they know that is more resistant, and if they can kill that, they know they can kill the pathogen. I have I have a lab in Milwaukee. I am not a food processing facility, so I have the freedom of bringing a pathogen into my lab and bringing the exact concern in. So that is a pretty good luxury to be able to have, because equivalent is nice to know. I wanted to know actual, and that's what we went with that.
Okay, so a client facility like we're in right now at Boreas Freeze Dry, they now have the research. How do they actually implement this so that you don't have to be on site for this?
No, they don't have to. What they do is they run the time and temperature required for the product they are running. They set that on the recipe on the screens that we were talking about earlier, and they know that they have to meet plus X amount of degrees for X amount of time, and they know that as long as they meet that, their governing body will say, yes, you have had a step in place to handle that. The other thing to take into consideration is the load that I used for going into these, the inoculated load that I used was in the millions, like above 85 million count going in. If you're talking about natural contamination, you're probably looking at maybe 5 to 10,000 count, not in the million. So if I can get that reduction from those 85 million down to less than 10 single count, then it shows that and these were actual counts. Like I said, these were validated by a third-party lab. This was not me, rounding up or rounding down. This was the results were what they were, and we did get a 6 log reduction, plus more than 6 log reduction.
What are products that are high value products, colostrum, if I'm pronouncing that right, those types of things.
So, yeah.
What is that, and why would you want to freeze dry it?
So there's a few things out there, more so in nutraceutical and the pharmaceutical industry, the dairy industry. There are products like lactoferrin and colostrum. I'll speak to lactoferrin first. It's very heat sensitive. There is a spray dried version of it, which is, you probably hear use of that for protein bars, bodybuilders, that type of thing, but it's not the highest quality product. But for like infant formulas in the Japanese and Asian market, they actually have the gold standard as far as what specs they require and how much bioavailability needs to be in that product. So a kilo of that product is worth about $1,500 US. So they don't want to waste an ounce of that, and losing a whole freeze dryer worth is, in the tens of thousands of dollars to per batch, depends on size of unit that they're running. So those delicate products are, high margin, high value, and they can only be done in a freeze dryer that has very tight parameters that can actually handle the very tight specs that product has. Colostrum is another one. That is the first milk that comes from dairy cows, or pretty much any mammal for that matter, but it's the first milk that comes out, and it is very high in antibodies. So you want to make sure that it's the closest thing to a vaccine, and that's what that industry is using it for. So they want to make sure that bioavailability and that immune properties of that product is as intact as possible. And part of the research we do with companies like that is they may have been stuck on a cycle that was 3 days long, and you could probably get away with doing it in maybe about half that time, or maybe a little bit longer than 24 hours or just under 24 hours, and still end up with the same results. So that starts justifying equipment, it starts justifying a process, and it allows facilities similar to this one or a dairy facility to put more product out the door with the same high quality specs that they have set for that particular product.
Yeah, I feel like that really opens up the door for a lot of opportunities in freeze drying, because it's kind of like the niche part, but it's a high premium product. Yep. I was talking to another colleague in the industry, and he was saying that the future of the freeze drying industry, to make higher margins, but also to really set yourself apart, is going to be on premium, high quality types of products, things that are difficult to freeze dry. You have to have a freeze dryer like a Cuddon system to be able to do kill steps. Not many people have that patience, not many people have that technical experience, not many people have the capital to invest in a Cuddon, so it can set you apart. Correct. And that's super valuable.
No, it certainly does. And not every product, like we were just talking about these high value products, those are not kill step products. Those go through a filtration system, very complicated, very expensive on the front end before they end up in the freeze dryer. But then, you're right. There are different processes for freeze drying. You can have really high-end freeze drying and really low-end freeze drying. The package still says freeze drying, but there's two very different types of quality. You can have a B or C graded fruit that is freeze dried, and if you're going to turn into a powder, well, who cares? As long as it tastes fine and you're getting what you want out of it, it's okay. But if you freeze dry, let's say a B grade strawberry, it may shrivel up, it may not look as nice, it almost looks dehydrated, but it's still freeze dried. Or if you freeze dry, fresh strawberries, beautifully sliced, and you run them through a delicate cycle on a properly equipped freeze dryer, that stuff looks almost like if you had just sliced it minus the shininess to it, and it's two different qualities, same product. So while the freeze dry has one big umbrella that everything lands under, what you put in, what you start with makes a difference, and how the recipe is programmed makes a difference, and how delicate or how accurate that freeze dryer is also makes a difference. So they all play a role. And
you make a great point, because I actually interviewed a private chef, Mario Fabri. He's going to be speaking at the Freeze Dried Summit, and he's a private chef for plant-based, like vegan types of foods. And he uses freeze drying to do different types of textures and taste, and kind of a new way of kind of experiencing different foods. And what I like about what he said is, and what you're saying, is that presentation is really key for him as a private chef.
Correct.
So freeze drying for a private chef, a restaurateur, 5-star Michelin hotel, or 5-star Michelin restaurant, you know, they need kind of top tier quality products.
Yep.
So that's another like niche business that someone could really serve. Is you don't have to go for the cheapest. You can go for the people that really want something that
Correct.
is really high quality.
No, correct. And that goes, again, what you start with and what you end up with, it plays a key role, and that's regardless of freeze dry. I mean, a Cuddon's a great piece of equipment. It's at the top tier of freeze dryers, but I mean, if I put a whole bunch of shriveled strawberries in there, it's going to freeze dry a bunch of shriveled strawberries in there. So what you start with makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
The process is part of it, but not all of it.
Okay, rapid fire, Lloyd. I like getting to know you. Other people want to get to know you, so I'm going to ask you some questions. Some are freeze drying related, some are not.
Okay.
Now, you're from Ecuador.
Yep.
You also work for a New Zealand company.
Correct.
And you live in Milwaukee. What is your life like living through all those three different countries?
So you actually missed one. Born in Venezuela, lived in Ecuador, worked in Australia, worked for a New Zealand company, and now live in Milwaukee. The Milwaukee part's easier. I met and married a local, so that's, you know, anchor's been tossed. That's where Milwaukee is home now.
Freeze-dried food for a year or never eat it again?
Eat freeze-dried food for a year or never eat it again? I'd eat freeze-dried food for a year. It's easy.
Weirdest thing a client has ever asked you to freeze dry?
Jellyfish. Jellyfish and human tissue, but the human tissue actually made more sense. It was for surgical purposes. Jellyfish was interesting. I just didn't think of that ever being a need, but it's been done, and I did it, and he was happy with it, but that was an odd one.
Can you describe the person that was asking you to freeze dry human tissue?
They're actually a lab in Colombia that they make surgical tissues. They're already freeze drying human tissue. They just wanted something that was more modern than the equipment they have. They get donor tissue from from cadavers, and they use those cartilage bits and bone bits from parts like shoulders, knees, and other cartilage bits of the body. They prepare them so it's very porous. And then that gets freeze dried, and tiny little cubes about 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter are what get inserted into surgical sites. And the body has a perfect match to graft onto. So that's what that was from. So that was an interesting one.
What's the application? You said the application to that?
It's for surgeries. It's for bone recovery and tissue recovery. They can, if the body doesn't have anything to latch onto, or they have maybe stainless rods of some sort in the body and they need bone coverage in a certain area, they can basically create what the human body needs to grow over, and then the human body will fill in the gaps. It's kind of an interesting one.
Last meal on Earth, which place that you've lived would you choose to eat that last meal at?
Probably Venezuela.
And what would you eat?
It's called pabellón criollo, and it's arepas, black beans, rice, shredded meat, and chicken. That's just, I grew up with it, so that's an easy one.
Yeah, what's your favorite thing to eat in Ecuador?
Ecuador's good on pork. A lot of people like ceviches and the seafood stuff. I'm not much into seafood. I like hornado and fritada. Hornado is like roasted over coals type pork, similar like what you see in the Hawaiian luau's, but they've got their own flavoring to it. And then fritada is same animal but fried. Fried in a big copper pan, and it's delicious.
What's one thing the freeze drying industry gets wrong that nobody will say out loud?
I think one of the things that is going back to the food safety side. They think that freeze drying, they've dropped the humidity so low that nothing will grow on it, and now you can eat it whenever. But it all comes down to, if you put something dirty into a freeze dryer, you're going to preserve it unless you've done something to kill that concern. And that is a big misconception. Some companies still claim that. They're usually medium to small size. Some of it comes from a very earthy approach where they think, no processes, this is the way nature intended. And I get the angle, but biologically speaking, it's incorrect.
Do you think freeze drying has a long ways to go in being like governmentally accepted?
I think it still has a ways to go. I don't think it's on the ground floor because you certainly see it in more and more places now. There's certainly USDA involvement, so that already shows that there's government approval of acceptance of the process. I think there's more work to be done because it's only in the last 15 years and more so, and the last 10 and the last 5 of those 15 that it's grabbed more attention. And the more attention it gets, and more studies get asked about it, more concerns come up. It's got more to go. There's more room for regulation there. It's just not there yet.
Okay, you've got $100,000.
Okay.
And you're going to start a freeze drying business. What do you actually start running?
What product? Honestly, I probably wouldn't do fruits and vegetables on that because I think there's a lot of people in that space, and I like being a little bit different. I love the stuff that comes out of it. So does my daughter, by the way. If I was going to do fruits and vegetables, I would probably find something in the superfood category, like maybe blueberries, functional ingredients, things that have that buzz of like, this is healthy, you know, this adds years to your life. Start with something that has the higher value added to it. And then, you know, things like collagen are interesting, things that I can throw my QA background into and say, yeah, I can easily turn this. Blood is an interesting one too. You can centrifuge blood and do plasma. That's a more sterile process, but things like that, things of a higher value added.
If freeze drying didn't exist, what would Lloyd be doing right now?
Probably still in the food processing world, just minus the extra step of doing that stuff.
Well, we've been talking with Lloyd Parks from Cuddon Freeze Dry. If you want to learn more about their freeze dryers and all about them, especially with being in New Zealand, of all places, check out the video description right now. You can also check out all the other videos coming up next to the thumbnails. I've also got a playlist for this visit with Cuddon about kill steps as well as being here at Boreas Freeze Dry. Check them out right now. We'll see you there.